Thanks. And thanks, David, for that intro and pointing out the deficiencies in my surname. It's really great to be here. Thank you very much for coming along to listen to me today. So I'm Louis Badcock. I'm Director of Products and Customer Experience at Simply Business. I'll tell you a little bit about what Simply Business does in a minute. And you'll see my sort of presentation title is a slightly strange, clumsy title, actually, of digital transformation, yes, twice. And I'll sort of elaborate why I'm saying that in a minute. Just a quick bit of background on who I am, just so you kind of got a bit of context. So I started my sort of career in software engineering, actually. Spent the first sort of 6 or 7 years of my career developing for a department store website in the UK. Before I made the leap across into the heady world of UX, and then finally found myself in the world of product management, probably before it was really widely called product management. So probably like many of you in the room today, sort of quite a sort of interesting, weird sort of route into it. So for those of you who've sort of looked at the blurb on the website of Impact, you'll see this is sort of what my talk's about, and it's about sort of essentially the challenges doing product management right and also changing an organization, hence the digital transformation part. And really, I just hope you can take away some lessons from the experiences I'm about to share with you back to your organizations and hopefully learn something from what I can tell you. So to kick off then, a little bit about who Simply Business are. We're the largest UK business insurance provider. And so our customers are small businesses. They don't typically employ people, so most of them are sort of sole traders. They really occupy all variety of walks of life. So you get, plumbers and electricians, but you also get people who make their own jam, people who run tea shops. When I was listening in our call center in Northampton, I've sort of heard people who work in fairgrounds and operate a hook the duck game, and they need insurance for that. So it's a really wide and varied customer base, and a base that typically sort of thinks, actually, my needs are so unique, how can a digital experience possibly meet those? So we've got over 500,000 policyholders or customers in the UK. And we sort of pride ourselves on the fact that we use BML. I'm sure you've all heard BML, that acronym with Build, Measure, Learn, and I'll come back a little bit more to that throughout the course of this. But we pride ourselves that we take that sort of experimental approach, tech and data, and we're here to disrupt the fusty old world of the business insurance market. The company itself, we were private equity backed, but we went for a couple of rapid acquisitions back in 2016, and then we were bought outright by a much larger firm called Travelers, who are not really sort of a digital company, sort of first and foremost, back in 2017. And the thing about Simply Business as well is, and I'll come to this as well, because culture is such an important thing about what I'll talk about, but culturally, it is actually a great place to work. We won the Sunday Times Best Place to Work 2 years in a row, and a number of other awards, largely on the foundations of a fantastic company that really believes in empowering people, which was obviously a prominent theme in the previous 2 talks. And we've become a certified B Corporation since 2017. And for those of you who don't know B Corp, it's an organization that believes that if government used to be sort of almost the dominant force and organization in the world, well, business arguably is now today. And shouldn't business be for something that's more than just for profit? Surely it should be something that's for good as well. And so to be B Corp certified, you have to go through a number of examinations on how you treat your employees, your environmental impact, is your supply chain free of slavery and stuff like that. So it's a really great organization. And Jason Stockwood is well worth looking up, and he's got an excellent book that's come out recently. He's our vice chairman. He's largely responsible for a lot of the culture at Simply Business. And he believes in we all hear stories in the news every day about a future where AI and machine learning comes and sort of wipes out whole industries and takes away people's jobs. And some people are quite sort of, look at that as an opportunity, whereas Jason sort of looks at it in a slightly different way of actually, surely we can actually help humans and help people have better, fulfilling, happier lives through technology. And that your organization, by the way, shouldn't just be for shareholder value. It should also be about the people who work there and the culture and the environment that you surround. And that's our mission statement, which is sort of an interesting one if you're a product person, because it's a great mission statement, but also it's quite hard to sort of necessarily get a particular hook off it, and I'll come back to that. So digital transformation, everyone mentions the words digital transformation. It's a bit of a bullshit sort of buzzword, really, actually, because it doesn't really sort of mean very much. And you might be asking, why would a company like Simply Business, which is digital first, need to digitally transform? But first of all, I thought, actually, let's try and get a definition of digital transformation. So I tried to ask Siri, and she didn't really know how to respond to that, which might say more about Apple's natural language processing than anything else. So I rephrased my question and asked it more politely. And these are the two sort of definitions it came back with. I'll quickly read them because they're quite hard to see. But so one was, digital transformation is a process of bringing change in the business activities to leverage the advantage that web or digital media offers. Okay, bit weird. The next one, a little bit better maybe. Digital transformation is not necessarily about digital technology, but about the fact that technology, which is digital, allows people to solve their traditional problems. Okay, a little bit better maybe. But I guess it's often used typically in the terms of we live in an internet era now, and obviously many companies existed before that internet era. And with that internet era, not only has the sort of the way of interacting with your customers changed, but the way of doing business has changed. And that also applies, by the way, to companies that have started an internet era like mine. So, not more digital transformation, you say. And surely, a company like Simply Business doesn't need to do this. You've already told me, Louis, that your company practices build, measure, learn. In fact, when you join the company, Jason Stockwood, the vice chairman, you get a letter from him, and it encourages you to read the Lean Startup if you haven't done so already, because that's what we practice here at Simply Business. And that, believe me, as a product person coming into a new job, that was just like, oh, brilliant, music to my ears. And sure enough, sort of when I arrive as well, I can definitely see there's a lot of people talking about hypotheses, even people in our call center talk about it, which is brilliant. And there's a very strong data culture. Simply Business owns all the data. We don't outsource it to third parties. We can see the entire customer journey through the data. We've been a successful company. We've had rapid business growth. But despite all those things, despite being agile and digitally minded, when I first arrived at Simply Business, I definitely sort of could perceive that there was something missing. And so, what did I see in my sort of first few months at Simply Business? And these were sort of some of the key challenges with products at Simply Business when I first arrived. And I'll quickly talk about each of them now. So, firstly, and probably most obviously, was we weren't doing any product discovery. So we had a very successful core business that was making lots of money. It was growing. But arguably, it was probably reaching the top of, if you imagine an S-curve, which has typical hockey stick growth of customers and revenue, and then starts to level out a bit. We were definitely starting to level out. And for me, it was fundamentally, well, are we actually really looking for new problems to solve? Are we really talking to our customers to think about what the next thing is? And our lack of doing that was obviously inhibiting our growth. And as you all know, sort of successful product organizations are continuously doing this product discovery. They know that the world changes so fast that they need to constantly be looking for the next big thing, because the thing that's their cash cow today might not be in 5 or 10 years' time. So we urgently need to start doing that. Secondly, and this one was pretty interesting from a cultural point of view, was the team accountabilities just weren't clear when I arrived. So a lot of our teams were set up as project teams, and they would deliver features after feature, and then they'd move on to the next thing. There was no notion of sort of owning a customer problem or continuously improving experience. And even this example here of the online customer journey, just to find the insurance that's right for you, when I got there, it was like, well, whose responsibility is this? And it was about probably 7 different teams who could probably put their hand up for it, but none of them actually was on the hook for it. And that unclear structure makes it very difficult if you're going to try and actually start solving these problems and making sure things don't fall through the cracks. So we need to clear out areas of ownership. And then thirdly, and this was really disappointing actually, was just customers just weren't at the heart of everything. We so desperately wanted to be a really customer-centric organization, because we're not like the insurance industry. We're disruptors, right? We're different. However, they really weren't. And so while we've got a very strong data culture, which tells us a lot about the what, we're often missing the customer insight angle, the why, actually talking to our customers. And actually, when it came to talking to our customers, we'd probably do that maybe once a quarter or once a half, maybe. So not nearly enough. And so we just couldn't really understand what our customer needs were as a result of this. And to that third point there, to the extent that actually our voice of customer team, who were sort of saying, hey, what about customers over here? Everyone listen to us. they actually managed to make the case in the end for a new project team to be dedicated to fixing customer experience problems, which is sort of great that they managed to do that, but also pretty bad because really, as you all well know, customers should be at the heart of every team's responsibility, not just a little side team over here. And the final problem, which was also quite surprising, was actually, despite this sort of lean startup culture and everyone talking about hypotheses, build, measure, learn was pretty, I think the understanding of it and the application of it was pretty limited. And all too often, actually, it meant A/B testing. Now, don't get me wrong, I love A/B testing. It's a brilliant way to get evidence for whether your change worked or not. But it is only one method, and by the way, it takes quite a long time to build it and to actually run the test, particularly on lower traffic parts of your site. And often you might just end up with a bit of a null result, which doesn't tell you, well, was the control better than the variant? I'm not sure. And there's millions of different ways you can prove or refute a hypothesis, and the aim really is to do that. We should be challenging ourselves to do that as fast as possible. And I love this quote from many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Mark Andreessen, who says the goal is not to fail fast. And everyone talks about, come on, fail fast, but that's good, but that's not the thing. The thing actually is to succeed over the long run. You actually want to have a successful business that solves problems for your customers over the long term. They're not the same thing. So, transform. So we set about changing the way we worked, and there's three key themes to this: is our organization, there's the people, and then there's how we educate and coach people about this different way of working. So firstly, remember I talked about how we were all project teams and focused on just delivering feature after feature, so we decided to change that. And instead of structuring our teams around our internal departments or our technology, we decided to structure them around our customer needs. So we created three broad product groups to do just that. So we've got our customer and consultant journeys. That's all about how small businesses find the product that's right for them and then how they buy it and stay with us. We have a global platform team, which then looks at how we actually take our core technology and make it work for, we're in the UK, but also in the US, so how do we make it work across both territories? The customers there being really other product teams, that shared services idea. And then we've got a marketing and commercial product group. In a bigger organization, you might separate those out into two, but we're a bit small, so we kept it together for now. So marketing really all about actually how can we make customers know about Simply Business and bring customers to us ultimately, and do that in a way that works really, really well and seamlessly. And then the commercial aspect is really talking about our insurers. So we're actually a marketplace at the end of the day, so small businesses come onto Simply Business and they can buy from a range of different insurers. But we weren't really looking after our insurers' needs either, so that's a vital part of any marketplace. So what do they need, and actually how can we serve them better? And then importantly as well, when it came to actually the individual product teams, each of those groups have multiple product teams in. When it came to the individual product teams, there's some really key principles. So one was, we want them to be outcome focused. We don't want them to be feature factories. We don't really care about the features. It's the actual result that we care about. And so every team basically had their own OKRs that align to Simply Business's strategic priorities. Autonomy then, so we heard about empowerment with Marty's talk this morning, and again, this is really critical. And we've been at pains to emphasize that these teams, to do their best work, they need to be on the hook for the problems they're trying to solve. And so that means that, yes, while the business and everyone around us has loads and loads of brilliant ideas of how to solve problems, and we'll listen to them all and we'll evaluate them all, nobody really knows what the right thing to do is apart from the team who's going to work it out. And finally, discovery-led, being really truly experimentally driven to work out what the right thing to build is for your customers. So, an experimental focus, a toolkit of different techniques that you can use, a common language for talking to the organization about the techniques, and a continuous cadence of talking to your customers. So part two, the theme of the transformation was around recruitment. So when this was back in September, and this was the size of the product team back then. So you'll notice there was no UX product designers there originally, and we had a few product managers, some user researchers. And if you think the size of our engineering team was about 60 people, and I like to think sort of quite simplistically, if you think about the relationship between product and tech roles, if product's there to, work out what the right thing to build is, and then tech is sort of, build it in the right way so it's scalable, etc. Both, by the way, obviously care about both things very, very intimately, and it's a collaboration. But if you consider that sort of balance there, you can see we were really unbalanced. We had loads of engineers, but not many people dedicated to the full-time job of working out what the right thing to deliver is. And so we also had the situation where quite a lot of people in the business would try and step in and do the role of product manager alongside their busy day jobs, which just doesn't work. So we've been on a real mission to sort of redress that balance and bring the right people in. And this is us now in September 2018. We've got sort of a lot more product people. We've got 4 UX product designers now as well. So we're really starting to grow that. We've also sort of expanded into some interesting functions like behavioral insight. And finally, sort of to go with all of that, and recognizing that you can't just become a great product organization overnight, we've sort of invested in this for the long term. And we've sort of taken an approach which sort of kind of starts at the high level and then works down to the details. So we've worked with Marty's organization, with his partner, Chris Jones, who came to our London offices. We ran a 2-day workshop for about 70 people across the company. So not just product and tech people, but people from the call center, from marketing, from insurance, for everyone to go through basically to hear what is product, what do we mean by product, who's doing it well, what does the gold standard look like, and why should we care about it? So really sort of start to give the company some of the language to talk about this stuff with. And then we took it to sort of the next level of detail with Jim Morris there, who's a discovery coach based in San Francisco. And he came over for a couple of weeks, and he worked directly with our product teams to help them with the discovery techniques that they'd learnt about in the SVPG workshop to actually sort of take those techniques and use them, apply them in their real life sort of objectives, which was really beneficial for all the teams. And then finally, we followed that up with Tanya Caudry there, who used to run digital at The Guardian and now consults for a number of product companies and VC firms. And she's been sort of helping coach and mentor individual product managers and designers with strategy and all sorts of just everything that's tough with their day jobs, frankly. So the idea is, and we believe that this takes time. It's not going to be done overnight. We need to invest in the long term and keep this up, because otherwise people just forget and go back to their old ways of doing things. So, you're all good product people, I'm sure, and you've heard me talk about a lot of things, but what's the actual results? What's actually happened so far? So I'll give you a bit of insight into some of the challenges and successes, not successes and challenges, that we've had so far. So firstly is this point about actually establishing those product teams I talked about. And this is really hard, particularly actually in an industry as complicated as insurance. Our customers struggle to understand insurance, and therefore, a lot of new people coming into the organization are definitely going to struggle. And so we found sort of having that right level of subject matter expertise, which really exists in our organization, embedded deeply into our teams, has been absolutely critical in getting them to be successful. Teams that haven't had that have floundered. And that's that embedding the right people point. And then OKRs, and there's a great book, Radical Focus, I'm sure many of you have probably heard of it, which is a really quick, short read about sort of how to sort of set up OKRs. And that book and everything you read about OKRs, you'll hear they're hard to get right, and you'll probably fluff them up first time. And well, surprise, surprise, we fluffed them up the first time. And be it things like we'd have key results for things that actually we couldn't measure at the start of a quarter, and then we'd get to the end of the quarter and say, yeah, well, we couldn't actually measure that, so yeah, it probably was the wrong OKR. To just the objectives not really being very inspiring enough, or frankly not really making sense to people who weren't close to what that team was doing in the rest of the business. And it's vital that it's transparent, that anyone can sort of see it and get it and think, oh yeah, I understand that team's mission. And then we had a bit of a problem with some of our team remits. Don't forget, we're going from a place where nobody's really looked after the customer experience sort of, as a full-time role for a while. They've all been project-based. And so one of our teams is responsible for the entire customer journey from finding out about what the right insurance is for you to actually purchasing it and becoming a customer. And that's a huge journey, actually. And we believe in small product teams, and this team found it very, very hard to actually decide where should we focus out of all these things that we could possibly be doing. Where should we focus? Our team remit is too large. And then maintenance, so tech debt. Misty mentioned tech debt this morning, and we discovered actually that we had quite a lot. And as we got into this, we a really good thing we did actually, by the way, was we agreed a shared definition of what tech debt, or maintenance as we call it, actually means, and we tried to measure it per product team. And we discovered actually that in the early stages of this, about 50% of team time was spent on average doing maintenance, which, that's really hard. If you're spending that much time doing maintenance, how are you going to get to the growth stuff? The second challenging area we've had is around our organizational complexity. So we're a rapidly growing organization. There's about 500 of us at the moment, and we're divided between London, our call center in Northampton, and Boston, where we've got a new office in the United States. And we've been doing that expansion at the same time as doing this digital transformation. And that just brings extra complexity to what you're trying to do, to try and, you're trying to introduce new concepts and talk about this stuff in a language that everyone understands, and yet you're expanding and new people coming in all the time. That's a big challenge to get right. And this point as well, that, before we really established product in the organization, well, the people who've been there for a while, they're all used to that old way of working, which was effectively tell tech what to deliver. They'll go and deliver this feature. Great, excellent. We know what's best. We know the right solutions and everything. And that just wasn't working at all for Simply Business. But people view products, and especially with, I'm talking about, design sprints and all this product language that people are thinking, well, why do we need that? Product's just a middleman, surely. It seems really inefficient. Of course it's not, but these are the challenges you face. So that all sounded fairly doom and gloomy, but there are some green shoots. And these are some of the highlights. So one of the ones I'm most proud of actually is our product teams are now testing and interviewing with customers every other week. So we've gone from doing it maybe once a quarter or once a half to literally every other week. We've built a UX lab now as well, which we're making really great use of. And it's just that the insight that this has given us, as compared to what we had before, is brilliant. Things like the tone of voice of our emails, who would have known it, was actually really, really annoying our customers and causing them to abandon us. Simple things like that, which we never would have got just from looking at the data. And we've had one team in particular become a real success story in this. And don't get me wrong, they struggle as well. You hear about the balance between doing product discovery and then delivery, and how that's a tricky balance to get right. Well, they really, really struggled with that for quite a while. But eventually they found their verve, and they worked together as a team. And again, that's a really key point in this, actually, is at the end of the day, good, solid team principles apply to product teams just as much as any other team. So, making sure the team all buys into each other, they've got rules of ways of working, and they all feel responsible for that is critical. But when you get that, then they will deliver results. And this one team in particular has delivered both real tangible business metric improvements, which nobody thought was possible in this particular area. And also, by the way, they've also increased customer satisfaction, and we've seen NPS actually directly go up as a result of their actions, which is a real sweet spot. And now the teams are a bit more established and starting to get going and understanding what they're here to do. We're the product vision and strategy is starting to come through. And so the teams are now starting to actually articulate a plethora of really, really exciting new initiatives that we weren't talking about before. Before, we typically lived a quarter to quarter with no real long-term view of where we're trying to get to. And the teams themselves as well, and we sit in employment surveys, but the teams as well are really, really bought into this and feel very, very satisfied about this way of working, as you'd imagine when teams are empowered. So, the future then. Well, I can't predict the future. Obviously, no one can. But I think we've made a good start towards to where we're trying to get to. And there's I guess there's three sort of key messages I wanted to leave you with really today. Was one is finding those right people is absolutely critical to kind of pulling something like this off. Finding people who know how this works and who are experienced in doing it and can help bring the organisation along through the bad times is essential. Secondly, that point around try to structure your team around your customers' needs. It's really is, for me, it's the only way of kind of really instilling customer centricity in your organisation. Any other way is a fudge. And thirdly, really, is persevere and promote, because this stuff, as I said, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's hard. You'll have lots of missteps along the way, and it's easy to think this is never going to work. But you will get green shoots if you persevere. And when you see those green shoots, you need to promote them as loudly as possible to your organisation to build that trust, so that you can get on and build the future. So I think our future is really exciting. I think we are just in the foothills of this digital transformation. We've got a long way to go at being brilliant at this, but we've certainly laid the foundations that I believe will get us there. And that's that. And I did that in record time today, so got a fair amount of time for questions.
Louis, doing it quickly just means we have more time for questions. Everybody can go to slido.com and type in the hashtag ImpactBP. We'll go with this first one, Louis. I have read that engineers do not make good product managers. How did you make that shift?
Well, there's an assumption in that question that I'm a good product manager, which I wouldn't necessarily assume that. But I really fundamentally disagree with that, actually. I think actually with engineering, it's again it's a deep and complicated subject, actually a bit like insurance or marketing, or pick whatever flavor of discipline you want to. Actually, there's depth and skill in all of these subjects, and I think anyone who's worked sort of deeply in a discipline, and particularly in engineering, where you've got a good idea of the art of the possible and how things fit together, is going to be pretty well qualified for then going forward and understanding and sort of being able to find solutions for customer problems. That doesn't mean it's easy, and you've got to be great at being able to sort of listen and talk to people, and not be an arsehole, to quote Marty's quote earlier. But I some of the best product managers in the world did start off as engineers.
Thank you very much. Next one. When building the new product teams, how did you identify the roles necessary to excel?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I guess some of this was sort of based on my experience, and sort of I'd come from a place, remember, where I'd sort of worked as an engineer and then as a UX person, and then sort of fumbled my way into product. And I knew, having been a UX person as well, I knew just how vitally important that is to building your customer journey, or your service design, as Misty would call it. So the fact that we didn't have any UX designers was a real sore thumb and an obvious point for me. But then really, there's tons of, if you haven't worked in organizations that are doing product, there's tons of great literature out there that talks about it, loads of great books. There's a product leadership book, which is well worth reading, but it talks about all these sort of fundamental roles. There's the holy trinity of product manager, designer, and tech. But, I don't underestimate those roles with deep sort of subject matter expertise like insurance or marketing, and challenge yourself. You kind of think, is that product manager coming into the role, they've got this enormous challenge of getting up to speed as quickly as possible with the area and learn the complexity. But what's the best way you can really sort of bootstrap that and turbocharge them to being successful, rather than them sort of floundering around and trying to work out what the right thing to do is? So, yeah, product design, UX, and then whoever else you need to make it happen.
Fabulous. Next one from Anonymous. Organizing teams around customer groups is a good thing, but eventually they will make products for those customers. How you organize this?
Organizing teams around customer groups is a good thing, but eventually products. Does anyone want to clarify? David, do you?
Anonymous, are you willing to clarify?
Sorry.
In the end, you're organizing your teams around customers, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But in the end, they will make products. So, and then you will have, again, teams organized around the products you're making for those customers. So, in the end, you will have
Oh, got it, yeah. So this whole sort of conflict, a bit like what Misty was talking about this morning around, you actually sort of get blinded to the product and the thing rather than the customer. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think the thing that really matters there is that, it's actually, again, it's your objectives and what you care about at the end of the day. It's, yes, the product, the thing is important, but again, if you're focused on outcomes that align to what your customers' problems and make sure you've got some way to demonstrate progress towards that, then that should keep you honest and real. The moment you start thinking about, oh yeah, it's just for the product's sake, that's the moment you start blurring the lines. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you have balance both.
Okay, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Anonymous. Another one from Anonymous. What is the best way of getting rid of the old IT mindset within an organization?
Just fire them all. No, that was a bad joke. It's really, really difficult. And if you've got a big entrenched team, I've worked in some very big organizations which definitely exhibit that old IT mindset. And you're not going to solve it overnight. I think one of the key things actually is really to have a CTO or a CIO or whatever your company calls it, but the person who has the ultimate responsibility for technology to understand and buy into this. I think if they don't understand and buy into this, then you're going to be facing a really, really hard struggle because people just probably won't listen to you as much as they will if it's really understood and bought into at the top, which is probably not a very positive thing to say for teams wanting to be empowered, and you can do all you like to sort of demonstrate results and prove outcomes and show successes, but fundamentally if there's not that sort of executive buy-in, I think it's a real struggle.
Awesome, thank you. Does the organization now accept product is important? What was the thing that changed minds?
Yeah, they do, which is great. Actually, I've been very fortunate, actually, I think, to work in a company that is really up for change. And I spoke a lot about the culture at the beginning of the company, and people have this sort of experimental mindset, even if we weren't doing it necessarily sort of to the depth that we should be. But people were sort of up for a bit of change, and people are up for improving how we do things. And so sort of when I sort of joined, and when I sort of talked about some of the problems we had, people sort of responded pretty well to it, actually, fortunately for me, and they sort of said, yeah, actually, you're right, we're not talking to customers enough, and it's not obvious who's accountable for the customer experience. So I think it was actually probably a fairly easy job for me, whereas in other organizations, I think it's probably a lot harder. And on that last point on what was the thing that changed minds, I think just sort of the visibility of customers in our business on a more regular basis and hearing customers actually talk about how they use our products and how they find what they need to find it's such a grounder for anyone in the company. It's something that everyone can relate to. So I think that's probably one of the most important things.
Fabulous. We'll do one more and then we'll get set up for the panel. Neil's back. Hi, Neil. Do you use any techniques to decide when teams should work on maintenance versus innovation, such as Google's SLOs, service level objectives?
No, we don't yet. And I mean, really, this is something we've really grappled with, and we still haven't really properly solved it, I don't think. But the technique that I spoke about before, actually, of getting together across the organization with your engineering leaders and other people to come to a common shared agreement of actually what do we mean by maintenance, what sort of things do we classify as maintenance, and then actually trying to break that down so you can actually measure it. So in your sprint cycles, you can actually tag what things were for maintenance. That is a brilliant starter for 10, because as soon as you're starting doing that, suddenly you've got visibility on something that you might have just felt before and something you can maybe sort of quantify. And just doing that in itself is, for us, it's really sort of shone a light on, well, this is part of the reason why some of the teams are struggling to get to growth, is because they're doing a hell of a lot of maintenance. So that would be my starter for 10, but like I say, we've by no means solved it.
Wonderful. Everybody, round of applause for Louis again, please.
Thank you very much.